Welcome to the Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery, where every death had a life and every life had a story. My name is Jenny Johnson,
Hello, and I'm Diane Hartshorn.
and as Diane just said, Happy New Year.
Yes.
It is, as this episode is airing, it is January 2nd, so the day after New Year's. So we hope everybody had a lovely Christmas, a lovely New
Definitely.
Year's, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whichever one you celebrate,
Mhm.
or none if you don't celebrate, or maybe if you're just doing like Festivus or any of those holidays as well. Um, we're going to swing back into all the normal routines again here in just a few more days, I think.
At least Monday. Because still, I think once the holiday, because we have New Year's, and I don't know if you have Thursday and Friday off. I don't. But then it's like after that, I think everybody's still sort of in vacation holiday mode. Then
Mm-hmm.
when comes Monday, it's like all back to normal.
I'll probably go into the office at least one of those 2 days, but I have some PTO I've been trying to burn off
Hmm.
this week that I didn't use up this year. So I'm trying to kind of burn some of that off at the end of the year here. And so as of this recording, which is New Year's Eve for us, this is how Diane and I are spending New
Oh,
Year's
yeah.
Eve.
We're party animals here. We can't even see, but yeah, we're trying to figure out our glasses. That's how exciting we are.
But yes, I did not go into work today. We're off tomorrow. So that helps kill some of that PTO. But that's okay. And this episode is our very easy end
And
of the
fun.
year, Happy New
Yeah.
Year fun episode. Although our original subject matter I had wanted to do, and then I was worried there might be copyright issues. So I was looking specifically for something that would be in the public domain. So we won't have to worry about the copyright issues. And in my researching New Year's stories that we could share with you guys, I came across an author, Ellen Robena Field, who her stories are actually fairly well known that she wrote, but she herself, there's almost nothing
Mm.
written about her, nothing out there about her. So I was like, oh, well, let's see if we can learn something. And
Yeah.
fortunately,
Fun.
through the digital record era that we're now in, I was able to find census records from when she was growing up through her marriage. And so I was able to figure out who her parents were, who she was married to, who her siblings were, who her children were, all of that, and sort of piece together parts of her life. There's other things, and I didn't devote nearly enough time to this, but I think if I went back, I might find more. There's other things that I'm curious about, including the fact that when she was a young woman and wrote the story that we're going to share with you today, plus some others, her writing was very well known in her hometown of Bangor, Maine. After she got married, I don't know if she continued to write and have things published. I wasn't coming across anything, but then I thought about it later. I didn't go back in and research the local newspapers in Michigan where she was living specifically for her
Oh,
writing. I
yeah.
was looking for other things in those newspapers about her life or her family's life, but I didn't specifically look for pieces of her writing there, which so maybe she was still writing even after she got married and it's just not as well documented. But I still feel kind of bad that these very whimsical, sweet little stories that she wrote for her kindergartners are that's
Almost
all that
forgotten.
seems to be remembered by her. Yeah.
Well,
So
this is why you started this
I
podcast.
know. So I did some digging and it's led me for our next episode. Actually, we will actually be doing a continuation on one of her family members that I came across in my research because I got fascinated and wanted to do more, but decided she deserved her own episode. So
Yeah,
we
of
will talk
course.
about Mariana later. But we are starting today by talking about Ellen Robena Field, who was born in 1869 in Bangor, Maine. Her parents were Dr. Edward M. Field and Sarah McGruin Field. And they had at least two other daughters that I could find through census records, Olive and Mariana, who were both older than Ellen. So I think, and there might have been another daughter because I feel like at some point I saw a daughter listed as Sarah, but I couldn't decide if that was another daughter or if they'd misrepresented her mother, whose name was also Sarah.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it seems that Ellen was the youngest of all of the children born to Dr. and Sarah Field.
Ellen and her sisters grew up in Bangor, Maine. Ellen graduated from Bangor High School in June of 1889. Even at that young age, she was recognized as a talented writer and wrote the class song.
And the class song, fortunately, they published it in the local paper so I could
Mm.
find it. Classmates dear, the hour has come when our glad school days are done. Swiftly now the moments fly as we breathe our last goodbye.
Many glances memory cast over the threshold of the past, views, defeats, and victories won, yet the battle's but begun.
For the future waits before, holding boundless wealth in store, pointing onward to a goal in the college of the soul.
There the master, all supreme, guards the hidden paths between. Even our imperfections stand burnished by his loving hand.
Farewell, teachers, classmates, friends, wisely use the life he lends, till at last on heaven's shore may we meet to part no more.
Mm. And it's so cute because I've been going through old pictures I got of my mom of when I was in high school. So it's like,
Well, and what's cool is they said this was a song and they mentioned something about the music, but of course, the sheet music's not printed. It's just the lyrics that were printed. But
right.
whoever did this, they actually sang it at the graduation, at the commencement ceremony.
And,
So I think that was really, really sweet.
and it's beautiful. Actually, it's beautifully written.
It is.
Ellen continued her education after graduating from high school to become a kindergarten. Ellen continued her education after graduating from high school to become a kindergarten teacher. She began teaching out of her parents' home in 1894. The name of her school was the West Side Kindergarten. We know for certain she taught at this location through 1897, thanks to the annual publications and the local newspapers. Throughout that time, she also continued to write poetry and songs for her students.
And what's really interesting, so kindergarten was still a fairly new concept at
Right.
this point.
Yeah.
It was started in the 1860s in Germany, and then it was brought over to America a little bit later than that. So the idea of these kindergartens was still really getting underway in the US, and they were developing them in different parts of the country. But I did come across one other article where she had gone somewhere. I almost want to say it was St. Louis, but I might be wrong. I should have put it in the notes. But she went somewhere to further her training in learning how to be a better kindergarten teacher and run her kindergarten. But yes, every year in the paper, she would say there'd be a little thing, New West Kindergarten recommences on, September 16th or whatever year it was. And then it would list her as the principal of her little kindergarten.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I know. In 1894, her book, Buttercup, Gold, and Other Stories, was published and printed by the Bangor Kindergarten Association. It included 19 short stories. According to Google Books, Ellen's literary style is marked by a gentle narrative voice, one that carries with it the soft warmth and vivid sense of wonder that characterizes classic children's stories. Field's work is reflective of the time in which she wrote, where moral lessons and wholesome entertainment were highly valued in literature aimed at young readers. Buttercup Gold is a tapestry of tales that skillfully blend elements of nature, kindness, and the everyday magic that can be found in ordinary experiences.
Of that.
And I
And
will agree with that because I went on to read more of the stories than just the one we're going to share today. So I
I
think that's
just,
a good assessment.
yes, I just absolutely love that. We need more magic.
Oh, they're
Our
so
kids
cute.
need more magic. As a young woman, the local Bangor, Maine newspapers often printed her poems and songs, and in true newspaper fashion, her social doings were also printed, including a short mention of a broken arm in 1898. Miss Ellen Field, who fell and broke her arm a few days ago, has suffered a great deal from the effects of the accident.
Which I don't doubt. And especially when I think about it, so that little quip there was
Yeah.
printed, in the social doings of the paper in like March. So that means she was probably still teaching at that point
Mm,
and probably had a classroom full of young students. Now, kindergarteners at that time were a little bit older than what we think of as kindergarten now. So now most kindergartners are 5 to 6 years old. At that time, the more common age was 6 to 7 years old, but
oh,
still young children.
right.
And she still had, a classroom full of them to teach with her arm in a cast or a sling. I mean, I
Obviously.
guess it's a good thing her dad was a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So
Definitely a good thing.
in 1900, she went to visit one of her sisters who was living in Michigan at the time. And that is when she met James B. Smalley and fell in love. The two would be married on September 16th, 1902, in Bay City, Michigan, where the couple would reside for the next 19 years. They would have three children: Mariana, Edward, and George. Sadly, their middle son, Edward, would only live to be 10 years old, at which time he was struck by an automobile and killed.
In 1919, the family moved from Bay City to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where James worked as a manager for a wholesale grocer. By 1930, James and Ellen had moved to Detroit, where he was, of course, working in an automobile factory.
Right?
And by 1940, the elderly couple had returned to Bay City to live with their son, George, and his family.
Yes. And their son, his George's wife's name was Harriet, and they had three children that they were living with as well. And I don't remember the children's names, but I did remember George's wife's name was Harriet. Interestingly, their daughter Mariana would go on to become a renowned doctor in the area. And while she only lived until her mid 40s, she had quite the impact on her community. Sadly, she died by suicide in 1948, just 3 years after her father died in 1945.
Ellen would live until the age of 88, dying on April 15th, 1957. Her obituary made no mention of her writings. Mrs. James Burroughs Smalley, 88, the former Ellen Robena Field of Bangor, Maine, died Sunday at the home of her son, George Field Smalley. She was the widow of James B. Smalley, who died in 1945. Mrs. Smalley was the daughter of Dr. Edward M. Field and Sarah McGruer Field, and the niece of the Reverend George Warren Field of Bangor.
Mrs. Smalley first met her husband while visiting her sister, Mrs. Newell A. Eddy, in Bay City, Michigan. She was married in 1901 and lived in Bay City until 1919 when the family moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan. She is survived by her son, George Field Smalley, three grandchildren, and four great-grandchildren. Interment will be in Elm Lawn Cemetery at Bay City, Michigan. In fact, the entire Smalley family is buried together in a plot at Elm Lawn. The plot is overlooked by a large granite marker inscribed with their last name. Each individual grave is marked by a flat marker with the deceased's name, date of death, and date of birth. So, and I was able to find those pictures on Find a Grave. And we're not sharing any on YouTube today, but they are available on Find a Grave. So you can see her grave, you can see her husband's grave. All three of her children are buried there. Several of the grandchildren are there. So they're all together. I think his parents are there. James's parents are also buried there as well.
Wow. In honor of the new year, we will be sharing with you today one of the charming stories printed in Ellen Field's book, Buttercup Gold and Other Stories. Happy New Year.
This book is lovingly dedicated to the dear kindergarten children, and particularly to my little friend Alice Caro Wing. Children are God's apostles, day by day sent forth, preach of love and hope and peace. Lowell.
The Little New Year. One cold morning, Maurice awoke from his dreams and sat up in bed and listened. He thought he heard a knock at his window, but though the moon was shining brightly, Jack Frost had been so busily at work that Maurice could not see through the thickly painted panes. So he crept sleepily out of bed and opened the window and whispered, "Who is there?"
I am, replied a tinkling voice. I am the little New Year. And I've promised to bring a blessing to everyone. But I am such a little fellow, I need somebody to help me distribute them. Won't you please come out to help?
"Oh, it's so cold," said Maurice. "I'd rather go back to my warm bed." And he shivered as Jack Frost, who was passing, tickled him under the chin with one of his frosty paintbrushes.
Never mind the cold, urged the New Year. Please help me.
So Maurice hurried into his clothes and soon out into the yard. There he found a rosy-cheeked boy, a little smaller than himself, pulling a large cart which seems to be loaded with good things. On one side of the cart was painted the word love, and on the other, kindness.
As soon as the New Year saw Maurice, he said, Now please take hold and help me pull. And down the driveway and up the hill they traveled until they came to an old shanty. Here is where I make my first call, said the New Year.
Maurice looked wonderingly at him. Why, nobody lives there but an old man who works for us, and he hasn't any children.
He needs my help, said the new year. For grown people like to be thought of just as much as children do. You shovel out the path to his door while I unload some of my blessings. And the little hands went busily at work, piling up warm clothing, wood, and a New Year's dinner. The New Year singing as he worked. Oh, I'm a little New Year, ho ho, here I come tripping it over the snow, shaking my bells with a merry din, so open your door and let me in.
Old Joe, hearing some noise outside, came to the door, and when he saw all the nice gifts, the tears ran down his cheek for gladness, and he carried them into the house. He whispered,
The dear Lord has been here tonight.
"Where are we going now?" asked Maurice as they ran down the hill.
To take some flowers to a poor sick girl, answered the New Year. Soon they came to a small white house where the New Year stopped.
"Why, Bessie, our sewing girl lives here," said Maurice. "I didn't know she was sick."
See, said the New Year, this window is open a little. Let us throw this bunch of pinks into the room. They will please her when she wakes and will make her happy for several days. Then they hurried to other places, leaving some blessings behind them.
"What a wonderful cart you have," said Maurice. "Though you have taken so much out, it never seems to empty."
You are right, Maurice. There is never any end to love and kindness. As long as I find people to love and be kind to, my cart is full of blessings for them, and it will never grow empty until I can no longer find people to help. If you will go with me every day and help me scatter my blessings, you will see how happy you will be all the long year. A happy new year, called someone.
And Maurice found himself in bed, and his sister standing in the doorway smiling at him.
Have you had a pleasant dream, dear? She asked.
"Why, where is the little New Year?" said Maurice. "He was just here with me."
Come into Mamma's room and see what he has brought you, answered his sister. There, in a snowy white cradle, he found a tiny baby brother, the gift of the new year. How happy Maurice was then! But he did not forget his dream.
Old Joe and Bessie had their gifts too, and Maurice tried so hard to be helpful that he made all of his friends glad because the happy new year had come.
The end.
Oh, that's so sweet. That is, I don't say painfully sweet, but that is so, so sweet.
It was such a sweet story. I loved it so much when I came across it. And like I said, I ended up reading so the book, and I'll link it in the show notes, but the whole book is available on Project Gutenberg. So you can read all 19 of the stories, but they're all very sweet and they all have the moral of being kind and helpful and honest and, the things that we were trying to teach children.
Mhm.
Well, we still try and teach children these
Right.
things, but, the way that kindergarten teachers were teaching them
Right,
then. And
exactly.
so I just thought it was the sweetest little story. And I thought, oh, this is perfect for our first episode of the year, as we're winding down from the holidays and getting ready to actually get into all the stuff coming up for 2025. But I just wanted something sweet and gentle. And this is a good reminder that through the new year, love and kindness are always
Exactly.
appreciated, no matter what season we're in.
Exactly. Most definitely.
So we will be back next week. Like I said, I became very fascinated with Ellen's daughter, Marianne, in the little bit of research I had done. So next week, we're actually going to go into more detail on Marianne Smalley and her short life as a doctor in the 30s and 40s. So that should be an interesting story to share as well.
I can't wait. We thank you for taking time to join us today for this ordinary, extraordinary chat. To learn more about today's discussion, please visit our website, theordinaryextraordinarycemetery.com, where you will find additional links in our show notes. And if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel, The Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery Podcast. This really helps makes us more visible to others on YouTube who may also enjoy our podcast.
And please don't forget to visit us on social media, where we share all kinds of cemetery photos, quotes, tidbits, and more. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery and on X at OrdExtraCem. So OrdExtraCem. If you enjoyed this or any of our episodes, please consider leaving a 5-star review and a comment on Apple's podcast, Spotify, or directly on our website. You can also leave those same comments on YouTube. Your positive reviews and enthusiasm for our show help others who love cemeteries and history to discover us and all of our ordinary, extraordinary stories. And if you're feeling extra generous and want to help support the podcast in a financial way, you can now buy Dianne and I a cup of coffee, either through YouTube or on our website. Simply click on the coffee cup icon and it will allow you to make a donation.
Until we meet again.